Thank you for agreeing to do this interview because
Hey,
Alycia Doxon is a seasoned operator and entrepreneur based in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida, with a BBA in finance from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and an MBA from Oxford University Sade Business School. She has built C-suite experience across a range of venture-backed startups spanning medical devices, SaaS, tech-enabled short-term rentals, and fintech. So quite a range of experiences, Alycia. She is a co-founder of Harriet Ventures, a modern investment company focused on acquiring and building businesses with cultural weight and economic potential. Harriet Ventures operates as hybrid holding companies and studio, deploying capital, narrative, and operator empathy to help its firms systematic storytell and scale. Now, you are running a couple of those companies at this point. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like for you?
yeah. So my day to day is hectic, to say the least. We have two active portfolio companies. Well, two that we acquired, and one that we're building. And so we kind of the way that we technically are probably closer to like a holding company, private equity firm, but we say modern investment firm because we allow flexibility for like the things that we want to create, as well as the companies that we're acquiring into our portfolio. So the two that we have, one is fintech, so financial software. And then the other is a modeling agency, talent agency. And so we manage a bunch of models and people that kind of surround models. So photographers and people that do hair and makeup and stylists. And we're spanning into creator management. So kind of social media creators, social media influencer management. So those are our two companies for now. We are fundraising for a third, which is in landscaping, project like yard beautification landscaping. Just kind of true to my background, we focus on the operations, and so that's what I got really good at. Was like the operations of a company is it's not going to be the same for every company, obviously, but it's some of the core tenets of how you operate a company are the same. And so we apply those same principles and structure to each company that we acquire. And therefore, we're a little bit industry agnostic in how we look at companies that we want to buy. So, yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you're in, and it seems like you're going more towards creative, which I mean, to me, there's always creative in business, but you can make it more creative. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so we actually do trend that way. And even with the financial software company, we have a whole education arm of that company where we do webinars and we write ebooks and do articles on like, but it's all around venture investing and how we deliver that content. We try to be creative with it because that's something that makes one of the reasons that me and Taylor, my co-founder, just never went into corporate jobs. We always kind of trended towards startups and startup management is because I think that both of our personalities do not we don't thrive with like being boxed in. And so we like trend towards things where we can create new things. We like start with an existing legacy business and then create things off of that is kind of how I see it. And that's, yeah, certainly what the direction we've gone and what brings us joy. Like it's a very joyful endeavor to do that.
Typical entrepreneur, don't like to be boxed in. I
Yeah.
think I've heard that before. So you also have SMB Angels,
Yes.
which is something a little bit different. Tell me about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking about it. So Harriet Ventures is the holding company. And then SMB Angels was actually an investment network that we started in October, November-ish. And really what we wanted to do there, again, there's an education component, but really the syndicate is set up to provide equity for other people's acquisitions. And so we know like our personal networks or just anyone that's trying to acquire a business, the structure to do that in the small business acquisition space, the micro private equity space, it's like it's still pretty messy. And so what we wanted to do was try to provide some structure for like the investment vehicle, education for investors, education for operators. So like after you've acquired a business, these are the things that you should probably look at. How do you run it? How do you hire people? Where do you find people? Like all of those things that are have to do with running the business. So there's an education component there with SMB Angels, and then the group itself is investing into acquisitions to help people buy businesses. Frankly, like mostly not like us, like solo operators. So like a one person who did their MBA and now they want to acquire a company so that they can kind of just run it as their own family business. That's kind of the deals that we're looking at with SMB Angels.
And I think that's brilliant because it's so, I don't think people realize until they get into it how hard it is to run a business. Like, you can have entrepreneurial programs out the kazoo, but actually getting in and running the day to day and finding out that most business owners, when they start, they have to be the VP of operations, marketing, accounting, and
Mhm.
HR. And, it's like you wear all those hats and it's hard.
Yeah, and a lot of times, even the businesses like, so when you're acquiring a business, theoretically, it has bones, it has employees, it's got revenue already. But even those, the small businesses are still a lot of them are very owner dependent. And like the owner, even if they're not doing day to day stuff, they're still the person that people go to that holds the full responsibility. And I think that's the biggest thing that people, at least that I know that I've acquired businesses, were not prepared for, especially if they came from corporate. Like, so they worked their way up at Google or Meta, whatever, and now they want to shift into business ownership. It's a very different feeling. It's a very different level of responsibility. Like, you are the be all end all. You do payroll. You sign off on payroll to make sure that people get paid and they can pay their loans. Like, it's a lot of responsibility, and we try to stress that on any of the operator calls that we have. That if you've not managed a team before, you really need to think hard about, like, you don't know what your management style is. So you don't even know, right? Like, and there's no way to know until you just go in and find out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot that people don't know they don't know.
that's a hard lesson too. And I I know I have some bruises from those lessons myself. And the responsibility for employing people and making sure they get a paycheck so they can pay their bills. I
Is
think a lot of people think, oh, wow, you own a business, you're making so much money, but they don't think about the fact that if you have a bad year, what
Yeah,
happens? You have to dip into your savings or find a bank that will loan you money. And usually banks don't loan you money if you run out of money.
right. You have to get a line of credit before you're in trouble. Yeah, and I think on the flip side of that, it can be. I got a text like on Monday. Literally, I was in our podcast studio here at the office, and one of our employees at the modeling agency is buying her first house, and she texted me for like employment verification. And I was like, oh, this is like, congratulations. And so, but that, like, there's on the flip side, you hold responsibility, not that that was like, but we supported her to do that, right? Because we have
Yeah.
a stable job and she likes her job, so she wants to stay and she makes enough. And so I think, yeah, it's a very emotional endeavor all around. And there's people involved, real people.
Yeah, and a lot of responsibility, but it is fun. And clearly, you study business. I've talked to you before. You're just so smart.
Thank you.
But what is it that motivated you to start your business?
Great question. So I've always kind of been in the entrepreneurship realm. It really started like my upbringing. My parents were both, well, so my mom works in corporate, but then my parents started investing in real estate because my dad is a trades guy. He's a carpenter and mason and electrician. And so he kind of knows the full gamut. But they started investing in real estate very early on, kind of flipping houses and building a rental portfolio. And so very early, I was exposed to the idea of working for yourself, kind of doing your own thing, not necessarily in corporate, even though my mom was in corporate America for a long time. And then when I went to school, I decided to go for finance because really, like, my undergrad was in finance, in economics, and there was not really anything else that was particularly interesting to me. And then even within finance, I went to University of Wisconsin Milwaukee. With any college you go to, like, they try to push you in certain directions, right? Because that's the connections that the school has and the donors, and so the directions there that were on offer were like corporate finance or personal financial advising. Because Northwestern Mutual is based in Milwaukee, and so they just sourced directly into selling insurance. And I didn't want to go down either one of those paths because none of that resonated with me. The only thing that really resonated with me, I took out one elective on venture capital and one elective on private equity. And both of those things were very interesting. It was literally like when I was a senior and I didn't know what direction to go in. After I graduated, I bought my first investment property, and that actually was the thing that allowed me to wait out getting a quote unquote normal job. It was a combination because I got a scholarship for school, so I didn't have a school loan. And then I got my first investment property with the help of my mom. And with that investment property, it was a duplex, so, renter. And back then the economics made sense. And so it was like 10 years ago, I didn't have to like work too hard. I just had to do a little contract work to make it work. And so then the first job I got was at a startup. And that was really my first step into entrepreneurship in earnest because I had a few internships, but I knew I wanted to go in the direction of like not what was being offered to me. And so I was just waiting, waiting, waiting. And it was probably 3, 4 months after I graduated that I got this job at a startup. And that startup ended up going from a single location of like four of us in Milwaukee to 30 locations across the United States. And we had 200 employees. And so like it grew very quickly, raised a lot of money. So that was the first like step into it where I was like, oh, this is where I actually want to be, is like in high growth companies or in entrepreneurship, like some sort of combination of that. And then
For a startup.
Yeah, no, I was that was my first job, and I was the COO there, and
So
that's
that
kind of
be the reason for the success of that startup because of you. That's amazing.
yeah, I got a lot of bruises there though. Just the rapid scale, and I didn't know what I was doing. I've never managed people before. I was like had internships, but literally none of that was when you're in a startup, things are like very fast paced, very just new information every single day. And I learned a lot about myself and how I manage and what I need from people that work for me and with me. And like I learned so much about myself through that experience. That was like 3 years. So anyway, that was the first one. Worked for a couple different startups, and then decided I wanted to go to do my MBA because I wanted to just kind of pull back and reorient what I wanted to do. And then coming out of my MBA, I decided I was either going to start a company of my own or I was going to buy a company. And then I ended up starting Harriet Ventures, which is a company that buys companies. So that's the path there. And really, it just all stemmed from like wanting to have the freedom to create the things that I want to create and work with the people that I want to work with and have like the freedom to just move through the paths that I think feel the best to me at the time and that I think have the most potential and not like really I just don't want to be my like worst nightmare from a work perspective is being pigeonholed into like one role where I do the same thing day in day out. That for me and my personality is just it's not feasible. I mean, it is, if I had to, I could do it. I just really didn't want to do it. That's
Yeah.
where it all came from.
It sounds like you're a very good entrepreneur.
Well,
Perfect. So I think you have some siblings. So tell me a little bit about them or one or
yeah.
two.
Yeah, too. So I have an older brother and a younger sister. We're all very close. We're all like within a year and then a half ish of each other. And so there's three of us. I'm the middle child. And I get teased for like, oh, that's why I'm overperforming is because I wasn't loved as much as my siblings. But yeah, I'm the middle child. And so my siblings both have also gone in the entrepreneurship path. And we started investing as a family actually like 5-ish years ago. I started investing with those two in real estate because my brother has gone the trades path. So he's a residential contractor here in Florida. And my sister went to school for design, interior architecture. And she's always been kind of very much interested in fitness and design. And those are the two things that she likes. She's a lot different than me and my brother. I think she's like much quieter, much more reserved, much more willing to like sit and watch Harry Potter all day. She's this very quiet life kind of person, whereas me and my brother kind of want to, move and do things and be more active. And so yeah, we've got an interesting dynamic, I think, as a family. They both live here in St. Pete, so we all live like within 10 minutes or so of each other, and I see them more days than not. At this point, it's like either at the gym I see them or like we're closing on an investment property on the 1st, I think next Wednesday, a week from now. And so there'll be just work to do together all the time because we really want to build one of the things that I think is important, I think, to my upbringing is that our dad is St. Lucian. So he immigrated from St. Lucia when he was 21 or so. And the culture that brought along with it's always been kind of instilled in us that we are working with family. Like it's not if you want to, we argue all the time, right? Constant arguments, but it's also, we look at it and we as a family unit want to build together because I trust them and I love them and I want to see them succeed. And so like, why not? We all have kind of complementary skill sets. And so if we put those things together, theoretically, good things should come of it. And so that was kind of instilled in us early on in our upbringing. And we brought that to now our 30s.
Wow. Yeah, that's really nice to be able to work with your family and have a good working relationship.
It's got its hurdles, I think. And a few years ago, when we were kind of like going a little bit deeper on that front, it's so difficult to bridge the gap between a familial comfortable relationship to like a business relationship and not end up crossing they'd still cross over like we still have trouble with it right where I have yelled at my sister or my brother in a way that I would never yell at like a person that I'm not blood related to uh, and didn't grow up with didn't know me as a child so it's still very difficult but I think if you can bridge the gap and do it successfully there's like a lot of value that comes from that.
Yeah, I agree because you know and you trust the person. And one thing I think that is important in building a team or having a team is sharing values.
Hmm.
You know what values your family has, which I think is very important.
Hmm.
So, did you have a mentor who helped you grow your business and develop as a business person?
Yeah, I would say that the when I think about mentors, I've not really had very many. I've had no formal mentors that would be that in title. I've had sort of de facto mentors, the principal one being the CEO of the first company, the first startup that I worked for. And he really, between him and the other co-founder, he was like CTO and then he was CRO and then he was just like kind of shifting, right? But as you do at a startup. And both of them really it wasn't so much mentorship as it was just like general support and allowing me the freedom to make all the mistakes that I did. I think like they never tried to micromanage me, never tried to, but like gave me the opportunity to say, if you want to dedicate your time and effort to this company, we'll let you grow with it. Right. Gave me equity, promoted me as like someone I was, I don't know, 22 or 23 at the time, promoted me to COO from like I just, was the first one in operations. So I just naturally went up, but gave me the opportunity. They didn't hire from the outside to fill any role above me. It was always like, if Alycia wants to do this thing, we're going to let her give it a shot. And I think that a lot of people don't have that opportunity or people that believe in them enough to like, because it wasn't necessarily an explicit thing, but implicitly I took that as like, okay, you guys trust me. You trust me and you believe me and you support me that I'm going to try to do this thing. And they allowed me to do it. And so I think they have been instrumental in like the early years of my career. And the CEO, Weatherly, who he started another company and is doing all kinds of things. But I continue to stay in touch with him because he's a good ear. He helped me like figure out how there's like different ways that people's brains work. And his brain works very much that like he only needs a very limited amount of information to just shoot straight to a decision. And I don't know what you call that. I think there's probably a word for it, but like it's a low information environment and he does really, really well. And so
Really?
a lot of times if I'm really smart, just call it really smart. And so if I have an issue, I can take it to him and I'm like, these are the high level points. And he's like, well, Alycia, why didn't you think about XYZ? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think I was just too deep in the weeds because I tend to fall in the weeds too quickly. And so he's been a constant ear for me on that front. I would say like he's probably the biggest person, the person that I come back to at the most. And that's every 6 months or so that I chat with.
I think it's a unique skill set to recognize talent and grow talent. Like, not everybody can do that. Not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, and I think you have to be very comfortable too. Like they were both very comfortable in their leadership that they gave me because they're the co-founders. And then I was just under them as COO and I had like a very minority equity share. But I think you have to be very comfortable to, in a new company, especially give someone else the reins and say like, here, you're in charge of all the operations for all the cities, all the cleaners, all the management, right? And to give that to someone, you have to be a very developed, emotionally developed person. I think
Somebody that I interviewed not that long ago said that it was a matter of trust. And that person actually had to go to therapy to figure out how to trust people, to
yeah.
let go of the reins. And it's written about in the book Traction, let go of the vine is what they call it. But not everybody can do that.
No, but I think that really limits your growth though. Like the only way that you can grow a company is if you can release responsibility as you grow and you like take the higher and higher level. And when you have people that can't do that because they don't trust other people to get stuff done or like they just don't they're worried that that person is going to get better than them in some sense of like, self-worth, whatever. Those that really causes issues for growth and then your company gets to a certain size and it's completely relying on you. So not only are you miserable, but also you're not making as much money as you probably could. The way I see it.
I see that in companies all the time, actually.
Yeah.
I struggle with that with some of my clients, they won't let go. And it takes
Right.
sometimes years to convince them that no, this is not healthy for them. Like you're
Do you
limiting your ability.
do you think that that is a part of their, like, their upbringing typically? Like, that's something that they one of those childhood not traumas, but, like, something that they happened earlier that they just drag through to their now adulthood?
I do think it's part of a personality and the one individual, it was a matter of trust. And so, yeah, I think it might be, or the inability to see in the future to see what that person could be. I think some people can only see what's right in front of them. And that I think is business growth limiting as well. If you can't think about next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's almost impossible to run a company that way with that mindset.
I totally understand. I totally understand. I think there's a lot of people that are, they default to what's right in front of them and what things are now, whereas, maybe it's an entrepreneurship character that like I tend to look at the most rosy 5-year vision of things. And I'm like, oh, that's completely doable. No problem at all. Whereas a lot of people tend to see like, this is the current landscape. So this is what I'm working with. Whereas I almost completely ignore that. I think in how I look at things and I'm 5 years out, this is what it could be.
Yeah. Well, that's probably what those co-founders saw in you is the ability to see down the road. I know when I was running a business and thinking about succession planning, it was the person, and I started looking at this because we had a speaker on timeline thinking in Vistage. And so I started watching how they thought about the future. Ones that couldn't think about next year, they're not going to run the business.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about succession planning, that's key in
Hmm.
who can take your place.
Yeah. Oh, well, very many business owners that we talk to just haven't. The reason that they're talking to us is because they've not thought about that ahead of time on their team. So like they've not hired in a way that allows a natural progression for succession, and then they end up having to look to the outside because they don't have anyone on the current team that makes sense. And then they talk to Harriet Ventures, which I'm not necessarily knocking because that's a great for us.
Yeah, that's good. So what's the one or two things that have made a positive impact on the growth of your business?
Yeah, I think that my answer would be similar to the last time we talked is that we started out far too broad. We're still somewhat broad. I think I've constrained things to the point where I can feel comfortable with them to the point where I'm comfortable, but we've really focused in on what we're doing and how we're doing it and what kinds of companies that we're looking for. And when we first started, and just for kind of lack of forethought because I had a lot of time to think about it in my MBA and just didn't come to a conclusion. But we did not come to the market in the first company that we acquired with a particular thesis. It was really like, I know that I want to buy a company and I want to be majority shareholder in this company because that's important to me. And these are the couple industries that I think I can work with because I got a background here, but we didn't put a size criteria on it. We didn't put a location criteria on it. We didn't put anything in regards to structure that needs to be within the company, none of that. And so we made mistakes on the first one in that the first company is very small. Like it's a very small company. Knowing what I know now, I would have gone a little bit up market in terms of size, but you live and you learn. And I think that the most helpful thing from us, like the most progress that we've made this year is because we solidified our thesis, what we're looking for, as far as companies. And we've started saying no to opportunities that have been presented to us, like that otherwise, before, if you call it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So, for example, we talked to a company recently, and their core function is consulting, but they built a software tool to go along with this, and they want to spin it off and then kind of create that into the other company, but they want to sell us that particular software. And I looked at it and I was like, this has huge market potential. It's software. I like it. It's like it takes a lot of the boxes for what I like as an entrepreneur, but it does not tick the boxes for what Harriet Ventures needs right now, which is legacy businesses that are cash flowing and positive and growing. And so we have gotten a lot better, I think, on saying no to things that, while they look shiny and fun, are not going to make us the progress that we're trying to make without switching to like a venture studio model or something like it. And so I think that has been most helpful for us is just like focusing in, putting blinders on a little bit in terms of what we need to get done with the core, like 1, 2, 3 things that we need to do this year. And then we'll move to other things. We'll reevaluate for next year and see if we can expand. But that's been, I think, the most helpful thing for me.
It's funny. So we learn from our mistakes, right? Fortunately, that sounded like a small mistakes. Can you think of any other mistakes that you've made where you think, wow, don't want to do that one again?
I think that not really, unless I go back to like before we started Harriet Ventures, then I've got a ton of them. And one of the things that I learned about myself is that it takes a lot for me to get to the point where I'm at capacity, but I tend to not ask for as much help as I need. I think not necessarily because I don't want to ask for help, but mostly because once I'm at that point, I'm too deep to know that I need to ask for help. I'm like just too underwater and I'm too in the weeds and I can't come up for air at that point. So then balls get dropped. And then I think that recognizing when that is coming, that was one of the mistakes I made at the first company was we were growing so quickly that we didn't hire in middle management soon enough because I didn't know that one, that it was an option, but the two, that I needed to, until I got to the point where we had like 10 operating cities and they're all reporting directly to me and I had no middle management plus all of the report, like, and so I got to the point where that was certainly a mistake, not having more dialogue or being more open to feedback, because I'm sure if I had brought this to someone, to like the CEO, and said, hey, this is what's happening, I don't know how to fix it. And I didn't at that point. And so then we had our ratings are dropping, and like we're, got turnover on people. And that was purely a result of my not being aware enough or not communicative enough. And that was one of the bigger mistakes that I made. I'm sure that there are others, but that one stands out.
Since you mentioned that, I really like that as an example because I see people who are learning management that make that same mistake. Like they don't know when to reach out for help. They
Yeah.
just don't know until bad things happen.
Hmm.
And then somebody above them realizes, crap, they're in the weeds and they're not asking for help. And then I see, the person over above them getting mad. And it's like, no, that's such a common rookie mistake, like such a
Yeah.
common mistake. So, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's probably pretty common, out there because it's really hard to know until you get there what you've done. And then,
Yeah.
and you don't know how to get out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, honestly, point for point, that is what happened at the first company. And then one of the co-founders was very annoyed about it because it was like one of the apartments buildings that we were working with wanted to boot us out because of a mistake that I made because I didn't like project manage this security devices that we were putting in the apartment. And so he was upset about that. The other one, Kyle, which is why he's my favorite, he's always very problem solving and how he thinks about things. So it's not like all right, you know what you did. That was wrong, right? Like, you know where you messed up. So how do we fix it? Now we need to move, like we skip over the part where it's like, I'm very sorry, I didn't mean to do this. And then just kind of, yeah. Yeah. But the case, yeah, point for point, that is what happened.
And yeah, and so kudos to him for realizing it is a common mistake. And this is how we grow an individual, Alycia, to realize that and do better next time. So awesome. That
Yeah.
man is brilliant, obviously.
He is, yeah.
Is there anything you wish you'd done sooner?
So this year is the first year that we have started going to conferences and events and things of that nature. And I genuinely wish that we would have and I just joined the WPO from last year because our group just got spun up again in Tampa. But we, even outside of that, I've not been a part of any associations or any groups. I have my little alumni network from Oxford, but otherwise I've not been involved in things. And we've really pushed on that this year. And the number of conversations that has opened up is like tenfold on the previous 2 years. And I wish that we would have involved ourselves, even in just going to one or two industry type conferences per year for the last couple of years. That is a big mistake that we made, is just we didn't focus as much on the in-person, the networking, like the just relationship building as we certainly should have. And I just, from the first 3 months of the year, I'm like, between Taylor went to Enterprising Women and South by Southwest, and I went to a private equity conference over in Miami. And just those three from this year have been very, very, very productive for
Yeah.
us. So yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And so tell me, since you mentioned WPO, tell me a little bit about your chapter chair.
Yeah. So Roz is our,
She's
I know.
amazing.
She is amazing. And she I think she was giving us the background on both her company, but also that she's the chapter chair for another chapter in South Florida. And then she was kind of moving around to chapters that were in jeopardy a little bit. And so she spent some time doing that. And so she's a wonderful chapter chair. And we all love her. And I also find that she's a fantastic facilitator of communication. Like she offers her feedback because she's got a lot of expertise. Like her resume
She
is
has a lot.
fantastic.
What's her name?
Roz Ulrid.
She's brilliant. And so your chapter, you've done the peer review in issue processing. What do you think
Yeah,
about that?
I find it very helpful. I find it yeah, I get the sense that the other women in my chapter find it very helpful too. It's for me, it's particularly helpful because at Harriet Ventures, we are just two in management, right? We've got portfolio companies, but it's not as if we have other people to lean on for regular feedback or regular problem solving. It's me and it's Taylor. And if neither of us have the answer, then no one at the organization has the answer. When the WPO is a wonderful space, I think, for being able to lean on people for different perspectives, but also other women and other women business owners. And they're not just they're not most of them are not small solopreneur type businesses. Like you've got an employee or two or 10, kind of depending on the company, but it's helpful to have both of those perspectives combined to problem solve with people, just because we're coming at it from that very unique perspective, I think. And so they see a lot of the issues that people that would not be in that scenario, the same scenario as us, where you're like a woman and own a business of size, that's very helpful to us. So I've greatly enjoyed it. The monthly cadence is fantastic for me because I just block in my calendar and I know it's happening and that's what we do. So I love it.
I am a firm believer in having a peer group. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room, right?
Yeah.
You want other smart people around you to bounce off ideas. You get resources. So yeah, I've really gotten a lot from participating in peer groups. So good for you for doing that and recognizing conferences, because WPO has a conference coming up in May in Florida. So it's right down the street from you. So it's 800 or 900 women in one area. It's loud, it's energetic. And then when you leave, there's like nothing you can't do.
Mm.
That's my experience from the forum. We call it the Entrepreneurial Excellence Forum. You know, it's like there's nothing I can't do. It's just so
I'm
powerful.
looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And that was Taylor's experience at the Enterprising Women, which is like different, obviously, but similar functions, women business owners, and they're all in a room and they're all like, doing their thing. And like it's amazing to see. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think I'm just gonna drive over from St. Pete.
You'll enjoy it. You'll really enjoy it. So, do you have any disciplines that you'd like to share with other business owners? Something that
Yeah.
you implemented?
Yeah. One of the number one things that we put in place at our company and our portfolio companies is regular check-ins as far as structure. And that is typically by department or by like it's either all management or it's by department. Doing that on a regular cadence, it could be monthly or it could be weekly, depending on what you got going on. But I think a regular cadence is really necessary so that you have both look backs to what happened. So like what do we get done that we're supposed to get done? And then also you can set the pace for what's going forward, right? So these are the goals that we're setting for the next month or the year or whatever. That has been really helpful. That's also one of the things that did not exist at the two companies that we acquired. And that's something that entrepreneurial operating system, as far as like how we work, we've taken pieces from that and we implement those because it's a better way to run a company where everyone like, and the other thing that I think is important is collective goals for the company and making sure that the employees are where we can bring them into that process. We found that to be really helpful to get buy-in, particularly because our situation is where we're like, if we're buying a company, they've been with the same owner for the last 10 years and they're used to that person. And we're coming in and we now need to build rapport with the team and help them find good reasons to respect us as new management. And collective goal setting is a good way to do that because it shows them like it brings them into the we're all invested in the success of this company type of environment. And so I think that some people tend top down management, like, I set the goal and then you guys all adhere to the goal. Whereas we're trying to flatten the companies that we work with because for us, it's better if everyone's collaborative, not to a certain extent, like, but everyone's collaborative, everyone shares in they're bought into the idea of what we're trying to create for the future of that company. So I think that that's really important too. And a lot of people, especially in small businesses, they don't think about things that way, but we were coming at it from a growth perspective. And so we have to.
Yeah. Since you mentioned EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is included in the book Traction by Gino Wickman, I have some of my clients read Get a Grip because that's a little easier to read. So tell me, did you read the book and learn about that process?
I didn't read the book. We learned about the process at the first startup that I worked for because we were growing so quickly. They brought in EOS implementer.
Implementer?
Yes. Yeah, but we learned it there, and a lot of those principles that we applied, we've now cherry-picked the ones that we think are most effective because not all of them are gonna apply to small businesses, because you're only growing so fast, but really the core structures that we like is the regular cadence, the annual goal setting as a collective, the KPI tracking, and that's one that kind of depending on the company, it's easy or not. Like the talent agency, we've not actually implemented a KPI tracking yet. We've owned it for 9 months, but that's because we got so much pushback on even the goals, like the having this is our sales target and this is what you're shooting for. That
Yep.
level of tracking was like very I won't say scary, but there was a lot of resistance to that. Just like the, corporatization of that. When it's really not, that's not what I'm trying to do. We need to have goals and we need to state them and then we need to write them down to make sure that everyone understands. But, far be it for me to suggest it.
That's a creative's mindset.
Yes. Yes, they don't like the stock structure. So, but we really like we internally have one. So, like, we have pre-created, it's, called a scorecard. We need to rename it because the scorecard is terrible nomenclature for that.
You
But that's really important that we put in place. And those are, I think, are the big ones as far as how we're running things.
yeah,
But yeah, I
that
like EOS.
yeah, yeah, and there's some things in that book I don't agree with. Don't tell Gino that I disagree. A few things, really, it's not new. Actually, I learned that process from MAP, which is in California, the Management Action Program, and implemented it so many years ago. So it's not a new process, but it's a good one. So
Yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend that for any business. Good that you're using that because it's such a good tool. And once you start following it, it's not that hard to follow, really.
No, I don't think so. And if you're coming from like no structure at all, it's just to have something, some frame of reference, and you can always decide what you like and what you don't like and what you don't want to implement. But just having some sort of framework to work with for us is necessary just because we plan to own multiple companies. And so then I need like Harriet Ventures has to have what's most important to us as far as conversations and new companies, new prospects. But then on each of the portfolio companies, those all have to have their own individual that then report back up to us so we can keep a handle on these things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely necessary for us.
Yeah. Well, good that you're using that. Gosh, I wish I could convince more of my clients to do so.
Yeah.
How about life balance? Because you're surrounded by family, but you're growing and busy and you're doing so many things. Is that something that you struggle with?
I do quite a bit. I don't prioritize balance. I don't think in that I take the space that I need if I need it, but mainly my goal is growth. And so that's kind of what occupies the vast majority of my brain space. And I do, I've got a husband and he's in medical school and I've got two little kids and they're at daycare with my brother's fiance. So they're with my sister-in-law and their kids. And so I feel a lot more comfortable with that because it's just still within the family structure. But yeah, I mean, days are long and they start early and they go till child bedtime, which is around 8 o'clock. And then I sleep and then I wake back up and I do it again on repeat. And that is for me, it's a function of what I'm trying to create, and I can do without the balance right now. I think at a certain point, I've not reached the point of burnout yet, but I recognize it's a risk. But for me, it's worth running the risk. Like what the dreams of what I'm trying to create are worth that, in my opinion. So
I think some of those people in WPO can help you with that because, like that, been there, done that. I mean, there's wisdom in groups like that.
yeah,
Do you have any regrets from that so far? I mean, you're early in running a businesses, but do you have any regrets?
I think really, I regret not focusing earlier. That is just one of the mistakes. I think we've wasted, not wasted, because nothing's wasted, right? But I think that we're probably a full 12 months behind where we could be or should be. And so I kind of regret not doing more introspection, more like consistent looking back on like, how's this working and can we iterate on this faster? Because, from my eyes, like knowing what I know, again, knowing what I know now about like networking and conferences and like how to make meaningful connections in this space to move us forward. Yeah, I just regret not giving that more deep thought. So that maybe would be one of them. I would say that's it for at least the time being.
Good. Yeah. So anything that you're doing is a learning experience, right? I
It
mean,
is.
a business is a learning experience, and I think what's important that I hear from you is that you study business, and that really helps you to have such a big advantage over other business owners. I mean, there's so many people that like they know what they know how to do and they just think they're going to go out and do it. And that is not all there is to business.
Right. And I think the exposure to certain frameworks. So Taylor was a Black Studies major. And so she was very liberal arts. And then she went to work for DoorDash when they're very early days in DoorDash, when they're like kind of startup scale. And so I think I tend to discount the knowledge gap that exists, not between me and Taylor anymore, but when we first started and I learned a lot, not a ton about, but like I had exposure to a lot of investment type terminology or structures or like through the MBA, I took a class on private equity and like they dive into case studies around these things. And when you don't do that, and you start completely from the outside, you don't even necessarily know where to look to start with that education to like get across that little hump of I know what preferred return means or like things like that. So I think I tend to discount how much I really was exposed to primarily my undergraduate degree in finance. That was helpful, I think, on a lot of the theoreticals. The MBA was even more helpful, I think, just because it was like very case study based. And so you're working through issues. Obviously, it's not as good as real life, right? Not as good as real life experience, but the case studies where you're working in a team to figure out a real life problem, I think that is extremely helpful. Um, and something that found great value in, but I didn't recognize how much value that had until I got out of the MBA and look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And studying businesses, they're, amazing business books, like that one up there behind. I wrote that.
Yeah.
Drama-free management. I completely believe there is no place in business for drama, although because we're people, there always will be some. But do you have a favorite business book?
I don't actually. So I don't tend to read business related books because I find them to be a little bit too dry. If I read, it's recreational fiction, fantasy. I don't tend to read business books, but mostly because it's not because I haven't tried. I find I can't make it through them. I start one and then I'm like, ugh, this is just, yeah.
Listen to some of them. Like there's
Mhm.
a book on KPIs called Measure What Matters. And I think
Okay.
if I had to read that book, I would have to slit my wrists. But listening to it, because a variety of people who help put the information into that book are, sharing the information. And so it makes it a little bit easier to listen. I am like you, I enjoy fiction.
Mhm.
That's my jam. I love Harry Potter. I walked into a bookstore once and I asked for Harry Potter. It was one of the new books coming out. This is a long time ago, of course. And this bookstore employee said, "Oh, is this for your children?" And I said, "No, it's for me." And it's
Dear
almost
me.
like he gave me that look like, "What is wrong with you?"
No, see, I love fantasy and fiction and Lord of the Rings and like all of those. I find that day to day for me, and it probably is just like things are pretty rigid, like in terms of what the activities that I do when I come to the office and these that I'm working on. And so there is flexibility and creativity there, but like immersion in I don't really watch much TV, so I'm not really on Netflix or anything. I don't have time for it anyway, but just a half hour before bed that I can read and just lay on my phone and scroll through like an ebook that, you know, is enough for me to relax.
But something about reading, particularly fiction and maybe fantasy, because I think it forces you to be going down that creative road. I mean, how do you feel that affects your business decisions and your creativity in business?
Never actually thought about it, Marla. I've not actually connected because I it's probably every day for at least 20 minutes on average, that I read, like, it's pure fantasy, dragons and magic and nonsense, and I think I've never considered that, but I imagine really it immerses you in a world that literally does not exist and that there are things that you can see, like I'm not really a visual reader. I think some people, when they read, like if you read about the description of an apple, they can literally picture that in their minds. I'm not really one of those folks, but there's still a level of immersion in like the world that's being built. And so the way that I think about that, like if I draw that into real life, is I'm creating a world, or I'm creating a company, or like, and this company has its own culture, its own identity, its own like I'm creating this from nothing. It's kind of similar, not the same, obviously, but I think that that probably is how that comes into play. But I've never thought about that actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love fantasy and reading novels, and I'm a constant reader. And now I am trying to write a novel or
Hmm.
two, and it's hard. I thought it would be easy, and then I started writing. I got into 4 chapters, and I realized, wow, this is awful. So I am in a writing group now, and I've been in
Okay.
one for 10 years, which is crazy. But
What do
one
you
of these
find
days I'll finish.
what do you find difficult about it? Like, what part of that is
So
hard?
there's a lot in writing that you don't realize happens in structure. It's kind of like building a business. You don't realize that the structure is there and methodologies are there until you try it.
Yeah.
And then it's the same as starting a business. You try it and then you realize, I need to know a little more about this to write a good book. So I have learned a lot in 10 years.
Yeah, Brandon Sanderson. He has written a number of different series that I've read. They're all sort of fantasy fiction, but he's also a professor. He's a professor at BY, and one of his courses is on creative writing and novel writing. And they published that on YouTube. I think this was like a year ago. And so if you haven't seen it, you should certainly watch it because he goes through a lot of like the storyline structures and the actual components of writing a novel. And I was like, I only watched one of them because I saw it on Instagram and I thought it was interesting, but it might be helpful. I just didn't, there is a lot of structure and a lot of background. Like there's a number of different themes and theses that can go into like how you write the book. And I just, yeah.
Well, I will look that up because
Yeah.
anything that can improve my writing, because I have been doing this a while. I am in a class, thank goodness, because my teacher is very patient, Barbara DeMarco Barrett. She's pushing me constantly. But yeah, it's a lot of fun making stuff up.
Yeah. Back to childhood, which is weird, right? Because my children are constant, like they wake up talking nonsense and they go to sleep talking nonsense. Like before bed, it's just like they're not actually saying words, but there's like emotional words that they're just kind of, yelling out there. And I think that that is something that we lose as we get older. And then to the extent you can bring it back, it makes you a happier person.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to make sure I get in what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, our plans really are to acquire more companies under the Harriet Ventures brand. So really, we're looking for legacy businesses in a couple different industries. We're still very flexible on industries that we look at, but we like financial services, we like media and entertainment, anything that has a somewhat female component to it, where like women are the decision makers, women are the purchasers. We like those. So even if that's consumer type businesses, we like that. Anything with an education component as well. So it's kind of spanning the companies that we do have. We like things that educate humans and help us grow and continue to develop in our knowledge base and what we can do in life. That's something that we find like a kind of core tenet to what we're looking at and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. So we plan to buy more companies. I don't know that we're going to buy. The original plan was build up to 500 million in revenue and then go public, and that's everybody's story. But I don't think we'll actually go down that path. But I see no limit to the number of companies that we can and should own because we're trying to apply responsible management to an industry, being private equity.
So do you have a region, or what are the limitations? What's the revenue that you're looking for, or the EBITDA, whichever?
Yeah. Yeah, we have an EBITDA threshold. So normally we want to look at things that are above 2 million in EBITDA. So fairly large businesses, depending. And then geographically, I would say we're still somewhat agnostic, although I have a light preference for New York City, Charlotte, Atlanta, Miami, and LA. And those because LA is just a center for creativity. So it's a center for like media and entertainment. And that's why we want to be there. Atlanta, to a certain extent, is like, we've got a lot of media and entertainment activity there, but also as far as the East Coast goes, we want to be in centers for commerce because the more connections that we make, the more businesses we buy. We need to be. I think there's really something to be said for being in the rooms, like or being like in the same geographical area as people that you might be able to meet in person. Because we kind of grew up in our professional careers completely remote. In the startup space, things are still very remote and kind of like coming into more legacy businesses. There's so much more you can produce, so much more like interactions and more creativity and more ideas. And like when you're in person with people, way more stuff gets done, in my opinion. And just, I'm 30, and so remote was all I knew until we bought the second company. And so yeah, we want to be kind of like at least have good reasons to be in those centers for commerce, to meet with people and make progress there.
Yeah, I do think that there's value in being able to meet face to face or actually walk around whatever your business is. Because
Yeah.
I've had a remote, multiple businesses, and somebody would tell me what's going on in that business, and then I would go there, and it's like, well, that's not what's happening at all. So yeah, it makes a big difference for actually boots on the ground, what's going on. Is there any question that I have not asked you?
No, I think we covered, a lot of ground on my background and what we're trying to do. I think the only like last plug that I'll give is for S&B Angels, which we talked about at the very start, in that our is an investment network. And so people who might be interested in investing or being a part of the network can always reach out because we're looking to grow. It's like a two-sided thing, right? So you have people who want to acquire businesses, they need capital. Then you have investors who want to deploy capital into those businesses. So you need investors. So, on either sides of those things, happy to chat.
I think that's brilliant because you are teaching people about what to look for in business and how to invest in businesses. it's something other than the stock market. It's really where you own a business, you're right
Right.
there, you know, ground floor kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think, our model with the network nature of it is that it's obviously not a fund, like, it's not a private equity fund where it's investing in businesses. It's really members choose deal by deal if they want to invest, and the check size is relatively small in that you can go because there's, members in the group, if we're all investing a $5,000 check, then our total check is, 200,000 or 100,000, whatever, to invest. Whereas, like, you don't have to do 50,000 per deal on, like, a very high ticket amount. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you can own a company, you can own a business for a relatively small amount.
Yeah, or at
That's
least a piece of it and, kinda see how it goes and help someone buy a company that they can operate, get out of corporate, or move into business ownership in a different way. Because I think there's a lot of ways to be an entrepreneur, and buying a company is a good one because you're not starting from scratch, and starting from scratch is not for everybody. It's very difficult to do.
very difficult to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, and you're just brilliant. And I look forward to seeing you in May at the conference because it's going to be a lot of fun. There are amazing things that happen at those. So one of the people that I talked to the other day reminded me that more happens when you're having a glass of wine with somebody, having dinner with somebody that you meet at the conference, having breakfast with somebody at the table. There's so many conversations that are meaningful just outside of all of what you learn from the speakers at the conference. So it's an adventure, and it is so well done. The staff at WPO do a great job in putting on the entrepreneurial excellence forums. I
Yeah.
look forward to seeing you there, and thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.